Friends, meet Rabbi Michael Lotker, a former career physicist who, through a personal crisis, found his way back into Judaism and then into a second career as an ordained rabbi. Rabbi Mike speaks of belonging to an ancient people, a people in passionate relationship with God, a people who both dance with God and wrestle with God. Rabbi Mike also participates in interfaith dialogue and has an ability to articulate what is common and what is different between Jews and other faith traditions. So I wanted to learn more. Who are these fascinating people, and what is their relationship with my own faith tradition, Christianity?
Rabbi Michael Lotker was ordained in 2003 after completing his studies at Hebrew Union College. As a member of the Reform movement of Judaism, he is active in teaching, scholarship, spiritual care, and interfaith dialogue, including significant involvement in Jewish-Christian relations. I spent a Shabbat service with Rabbi Mike and sat down with him to learn more about Judaism, specifically its relationship with Christianity. The conversation was as honest as it was invigorating. We began by talking about a difficult experience that eventually led him deeper into faith. In your book at the beginning, you talk about the illness of your first wife, which eventually led to her death, and how grappling with that somehow brought you closer to your faith. What was it about that experience, Rabbi Mike, that led you closer to your Jewish faith?
My late wife, Carol, suffered from an illness called Huntington's disease, which is a genetic illness. And I knew her father had it, so I knew that she had a 50% chance of having it, and I would watch her for symptoms. And I could see she was going to develop it, even before she was aware of it. And so I realized that I was going to be going through some serious spiritual crises. And at the same time, I started learning more about my Judaism. I was born a Jew and raised a Jew, but not a very knowledgeable Jew. And so at the same time, I started learning more about Judaism, taking some classes, reading some books. And it struck me that this is a source of spiritual strength. I saw it as a spiritual strength bank that I better start making deposits into if I can expect to make withdrawals therefrom. And so very much so led me in greater depth into my Judaism.
I recently experienced the death of my younger brother about 4 months ago. And I had spent a lot of time helping people through the grieving process and the experience of loss in the Catholic tradition, but never before experienced that closeness to my tradition in the aftermath of something very personal. So I'm thinking maybe this is akin to your experience. When I was going through the liturgy, the funeral liturgy, the symbolism that I had known cognitively for forever became more meaningful to me in helping me process his death. And I thought of you, and I thought of Judaism and how our faith traditions really do have the elements to help people through. Was this also your experience?
So, again, what I would say is I went through a very long period of time when my wife was just getting more and more ill. She was in a nursing home for 12 years, and she was pretty ill for 4 or 5 years before that. So, in interacting with some rabbis that I've met along the way, they gave me insight into kind of the larger meaning of suffering and what we learn from suffering. I love that Judaism allows you to argue and fight with God. The word Israel means one who wrestles with God. And I love that you can wrestle and even win. The Bible is filled with examples of people arguing with God and winning the argument. And I love that. And I love the idea that having a powerful relationship with God isn't all about sweetness and light and praises. In my interfaith work, I will so often hear somebody going through struggles and be talking with them, and they will kind of fall back and say, God is good. And it's almost like they're afraid to say, this is awful what God is doing with me, to me. I am angry as all get out at God, and I've got a few bones to pick with God. I love that Judaism embraces that idea and makes it okay.
So you wrestle with God.
All the time. All the time.
You must wrestle with God about the illness and the death of your first wife.
Without a doubt. If I thought that God was truly what's sometimes called the three O's, omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent, if I thought that that was really God's doing, I would go work for some other boss.
So along this journey back to your Jewish faith, you decided to write a book.
Yes.
And a book, A Christian's Guide to Judaism. Mm-hmm. And in the book, you talk about the reasons why you wrote the book, and you use this, you said that there is an opportunity here, a window of understanding. Mm-hmm. What was that opportunity that you saw, Rabbi Mike, that motivated you to write this book?
So what I saw is, after 1900 years of Christian teaching, that Jews have to be humiliated, Jews have to be repressed, Jews are guilty of the sin of murdering Jesus, of not accepting Jesus, of not accepting his teachings. After 1900 years of that teaching, it led to its logical conclusion, which was the Holocaust. And so most churches, not all, but certainly the Catholic Church, has led in repudiating this idea of supersessionist theology and accepting Jews and Judaism. My book is published by a Catholic publisher. I am invited all the time to speak in front of Catholics, including your deaconate formation class. And churches. That wouldn't have happened before the Holocaust. Jews wouldn't go into a church to speak, and Christians wouldn't invite a Jew into a church to speak. I think it was John Paul II was the first pope to ever visit a synagogue. So that's a period of goodwill. Now the question is, how long does that stay? We're living in the aftermath of the Holocaust, and it's vivid to us. I know Holocaust survivors. I've spent a week at Auschwitz. It's very vivid to me. Some point in time, it's going to be like the War of 1812. This stuff happened. So it seemed to me that we are in a period of understanding between Christians and Jews that we better cement because it's fragile. And that was the main reason I decided to write this book.
In your book, you talk about how for Christians, it's not difficult to feel warmth toward Jews, like I feel warmth to you, mm-hmm. and we're friends. Mm-hmm. But for Jews towards Christians, it's a different feeling.
Yeah.
You say in your book, it's difficult for Jews to feel that warmth for Christians. Why is that?
1900 years of anti-Semitism. Jews being put to death by Christians. Not necessarily part of Christianity, although in the Crusades, when the Christian soldiers were marching through Europe, going toward the Holy Land to fight the infidels, they would realize, hey, we got infidels in this town. Let's murder them. So the relationship between Jews and Christians has been horrible. But Jews have been afraid of Christians. I don't think Christians have been afraid of Jews. These days, there's goodwill, I would say, in the part of Christianity to Judaism. Christianity has recognized and not been shy about promulgating the fact that Jesus was Jewish, the apostles were Jewish. All the authors, possibly with the exception of Luke, of the New Testament, were Jewish. So, when Pope John Paul entered the synagogue in Rome, he said, "I am Joseph, your brother," and that was his baptism name. Of course, quoting the story of Joseph in Genesis.
Right.
Christianity sees Judaism these days as a beloved older brother, part of the family. The attitude, particularly among older generations, I would say my generation and above, about Christianity is we're suspicious. We think you're out to get us. And it's because for 1900 years it was true. And those kinds of things don't disappear quickly. I would say in subsequent generations, my children's generation, there's so much intermarriage and there's so much interrelationships between Jews and Christians that I don't think Jews are so suspicious about Christians coming to get them.
At the end of Matthew's gospel, there's a famous passage where Jesus, resurrected from the dead, tells his disciples, "Go out and make disciples of all nations." Mm-hmm. Christianity is a proselytizing faith tradition. It's part of it's part of what it is. Mm-hmm. Is this also part of why many Jews don't feel comfortable when Christians come into the room or come into a class to learn Hebrew?
I feel very warm toward Christianity, as you well know, but I don't feel so warm toward Messianic Judaism or Jews for Jesus, because I do think the purpose of those movements is to convert Jews to Christianity without them realizing it, that they're saying, well, it's really no big deal.
Right. Well, that brings up a question, Rabbi Mike. In your book, you talk about this. Mm-hmm. And so let me ask you this. What is the problem with the statement, why can't you just accept that he's come, the Messiah, and just go on being Jewish?
Yeah, so there's two problems. Number one, Jesus hasn't fulfilled any of the prophecies concerning the Messiah. No world peace, no elimination of disease. As far as I know, lions are not lying down with lambs without one of them being dinner. None of those prophecies are fulfilled, so that's sort of on a theological basis, on a historical basis, I should say. No king of Israel. The Messiah is Melech Yisrael, is the king of Israel. The idea behind a Messiah is there has always been a king of Israel in biblical times from the house of David. Greek and Roman times, no more king of Israel. Last 2,000 years, no government, no Jewish government in Israel. So we're waiting for a king. So where's the king? And it certainly wasn't Jesus. Jesus was never crowned as king of Israel with any authority to rule over Israel. But more importantly, as I emphasize in the book, the question is not who is the Messiah, but who is God. The idea of the Messiah being God is completely out of the bounds of Judaism. Only God is God. That's actually something that Judaism and Islam share. The idea of a physical incarnation, the idea that my faith in Jesus takes the place of my doing a lot of commandments, obeying Jewish law, such as pork. Okay? Two places in my Bible and yours, it says don't eat pork in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. My understanding is for Christians, faith in Jesus takes the place of obeying the law. In the words of John, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. In the beginning was Torah and law, the law becomes flesh. Yeah. That's not true for Jews. For Jews, the law is still the law, and we have to obey the law. And faith in somebody is not a substitute for the law. So the issue isn't whether Jesus was the Messiah. That was something that people could argue about for a few centuries in the time of Jesus. The issue is Jesus God? And does faith in Jesus take the place of right actions, what Christians would call works? And that's really the issue.
I can imagine a Christian asking you, do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead?
No. Do you believe that Muhammad made a night flight to the far place, Al-Aqsa? Do you believe that Joseph Smith found these tablets? Most Christians would say to me, other than, Latter-day Saints, would say, no. Why not? Well, that's not my sacred scripture. Well, the New Testament is not my sacred scripture. By the way, I also have some doubts whether Elijah and Elisha raised people from the dead, because I take these stories seriously, but not literally.
So in spite of pretty deep differences in understanding of who Jesus is, how is it that you get along so well with Christians?
It's actually quite simple. As a Jew, my focus is on what Christians would call works, what you do. As a Jew, I don't care so much what my fellow Jews' theology is. Are they consistent with Jewish law? Do they give to charity? Are they kind to people? Are they kind to animals? If I were a more traditional Jew, I would ask, do they pray in the correct way? Do they keep strictly kosher? I don't so much care what they believe. I care what they do. So how much more so should I not care what a non-Jew believes? You're doing good things for the community. You're in hunger drives. You're building hospitals. There's a few hospitals that have crosses on them, like almost all of them. You're Mother Teresa, lepers, wonderful things in the world. That's all I care about. I don't care about your theology.
Yeah.
I love to talk about theology. I don't care about a Jew's theology. How much less do I care about a non-Jew's theology?
And this comes out of your Judaism, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
This I want to see what you're doing.
Exactly. And it's clear to me that people are leading what I would call holy lives as a result of their Christianity. So how can I be upset with Christianity as long as they're not coming after me?
Life after death.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard you say, and I think it's in your book, that many Jews don't believe in an afterlife. But what this does is it doesn't create despair and hopelessness. It does the opposite. It means that this life is all we have, and that I better make the best of it now. And thus the emphasis on what people do. Is this what you're talking about as well?
I would not state it that way.
Okay.
I would say many Jews incorrectly presume that Judaism does not teach that there is life after death. When people ask me, what do Jews believe about life after death? My somewhat flip response is, I don't know, go ask them. I can answer the question, what does Judaism teach about life after death? And that is many things. But the emphasis, the focus is on this life. Because we don't know with any certainty about life after death. And the example I always use is, suppose there were a group of, a dozen Jews, traditional Jews, and we were having a discussion about life after death. And there's opinions all over the place. And we can't come to an agreement. Is that a problem? No. Now it's time for lunch, and we're having chicken. And we can't come to an agreement whether that chicken is kosher. Is that a problem? Big problem. We can't eat. Judaism has teachings about resurrection. Judaism has teachings about reincarnation. Particularly the mystics are very into reincarnation. There's discussion about communication between worlds. You have all of these things. I have one of the books behind me is called Jewish Views, plural, of the Afterlife. And it's actually a PhD thesis. And it's, about 400 pages with several hundred footnotes. It's a scholarly piece of work, and there's probably 2 or 3 dozen different perspectives on the afterlife. And they're all kosher. They're all okay. And we're not telling you which one is true. We are telling you this chicken's kosher, that chicken's not. But resurrection, reincarnation, you take your pick. To say that Judaism teaches there is no afterlife is incorrect. You can be a perfectly good Jew and not believe in an afterlife. That's perfectly okay, as long as you obey the rules while we're living. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set the course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim.
What would I potentially enjoy as a Christian at a Jewish service?
So what I would hope you would enjoy, being a little bit knowledgeable, is understanding that the prayers you're hearing are prayers that Jesus would have heard. And sometimes I comment at interfaith settings that the Hebrew would be the only thing that Jesus would recognize as his native language. So getting a little bit of a sense of the roots of Christianity. And one of the things that I enjoy about visiting services in other religions is just watching people connect to God in different ways. So we both worship the same God. So I just love seeing how people connect with that God, in a very different manner and system. And I would hope that people visiting a synagogue would get equal pleasure out of seeing a different way to worship God. So the bottom lines for us today are we are Am Yisrael. We are Jews. We are the nation Israel. We are an Am Brit, a covenant people. We are in a dynamic, powerful, vibrant, passionate relationship with God. Like any interesting dance, there are lots of steps, lots of moods. Some are proud and triumphant, Simchat Torah celebrations, jeering at Haman and applauding Queen Esther and Mordecai, evenings at Torah school here at Temple Adat Elohim. Some are stirring and inspiring, proclaiming the Shema, the sound of the shofar, and as we sing Hatikvah. Some are quite dreamy and spiritual, lighting Shabbat candles, blessing the children, silent prayer. Sometimes we are in our partner's embrace, dancing panim al panim. In Yiddish we'd say punim to punim, cheek to cheek. And sometimes we separate and seem to be dancing by ourselves. But the music does not stop, and our relationship with God does not stop. This 4,000-year-old dance continues, and I invite you to join together as we study the music, the rhythms, and the dance steps of Judaism.
Rabbi Mike, thank you so much for sitting down, spending the time with me.
I can truly say it's my pleasure.